Does it ever feel like you're posting consistently on social media, but no one really seems to care? Well, you're not imagining it. You're showing up, you're putting in the work, you're trying to play the game, but nothing clicks. You're not getting new growth, no fans. What's going on, right? Well, the worst part that happens through all this is we start to doubt ourselves and we start to think, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm not good on camera, or I've missed my shot. I've heard all these different things. But what if that wasn't the reason things weren't working? What if the reason things weren't working were because we were looking at them in a particular way that wasn't actually serving our music business? So in this video today, I actually want to share with you the concepts, the things that you need to start implementing in your social media so you can start to make it work for you. Because the reason it doesn't work for most people is because how they view it. So let's dive into it. The first thing that we need to understand that is going to serve you the best when it comes to getting your social media to work for you is you have to start testing things. And when I say testing things, a lot of musicians don't know what I mean and how to do it. So I kind of want to break that down a little bit. So the first thing that I really want to get clear is why you should be testing. There's a great business book called Managing Oneself by Peter F. Drucker. And there's a line in there. He says, most people think they know what they're good at, and they're mostly wrong. And most people on the other side of that think they know what they're bad at, and most likely are wrong. The only thing that can actually show you whether that is the truth or not is feedback, getting feedback. So the only way that you can get that feedback is by putting out content on people's feeds. That's why it's called feedback. We're going to get it on the feed so we can get some information back, okay? So if we're out there and we're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we're getting the same results over and over and over and over again, that should be a huge warning sign for you that it's time to start testing things. Because I know musicians who are scared to break out of this and start testing. They're scared to try new things because they have this sort of persona fear. What do I mean by that? They have this fear that by trying different things, it's going to affect their persona. See, a lot of people misunderstand and conflate branding and persona. Those are not the same thing. There's a part of branding where you sort of play into a persona, but it's not your persona, like from a psychological perspective, right? Like how Sigmund Freud would talk about it. So when you look at it, most musicians, they'll sit there and go like, for example, the rock and metal guys, we're the worst at this. We'll be like, I don't want to post any social media content unless I'm like on stage with a mic in hand or a guitar in hand and I'm going like, in front, like unless I'm doing that, I don't feel like I'm cool enough and I shouldn't be sharing it on social media because it'll make me look a certain way. It won't make me look as cool, right? Well, as Tyler, the Creator, says, if you try to be too cool, you're going to freeze to death. So most musicians are trying to be so cool. I want to protect and preserve my persona. The word that they use as an excuse, sometimes there's a reason for this, but some people use the word mystique as a crutch. They're like, well, where's the mystique around the project? I'm like, unless you're doing something like Sleep Token, right? Where you've got this kind of mystique to you. Nobody knows your name. Back in the 90s or the early 2000s, we would say like Slipknot had some mystique to it. Again, I'm staying in the rock and metal vein because that's where my nature and where my genre lives. But for you, I'm sure you could point out tons of artists where this is the case, right? So you have to look at it where there's a persona that you put out there and you attract people with, right? But that's not who they are up here. We don't conflate those things as an artist if we're smart, right? But so many artists are scared to put themselves out there in different situations because they're afraid of it affecting their persona, right? So you can have a brand that's attached to this kind of not mystical, but mystique-driven persona. But that doesn't mean that you can't try new things. That doesn't mean you can't go and break out of the box a little bit. Try to present yourself in a few different ways so that your fans can actually resonate. Because here's the truth. If you've been consistently posting a certain way and you've been getting a certain result and it is not growing, that is the fans and the algorithm, in which people like to blame the algorithm. The algorithm is you and the algorithm is people. So just know that, because the algorithm is built off people's interactions. So unless people interact with the algorithm, there is no algorithm. So I just want to dispel that little myth right there. So we blame the algorithm and stuff, but really what it is that's showing you, hey, this didn't click. Hey, this didn't click. And sometimes it's painful. Sometimes you put 4 hours into a piece of content and it doesn't click. What do? Do we sit around and go, this is all bull, it's all for naught, this doesn't work? No, we don't do that. If we have that perspective of testing in mind, we don't put so much weight and expectation on a piece of social media content, right? But when you've got this kind of persona-driven thing, you think you know what works, you think you know what's cool for them, and then you go out there and you work hard to create something that you think they will think is cool. And then when you post it and they actually didn't think it was cool, you're like, oh, the algorithm. Like we can't do that. We have to actually look in the mirror and just be honest and say, oh, that didn't connect. Why didn't that connect? And then as you try new things and you test new things, you will find what does connect. See, a lot of artists have this sunken cost fallacy where my whole profile is a certain type of way. You remember back when Instagram grids, like grid designs were a thing? I can't think of anything that I've seen my actual clients get anxiety about that is so unimportant to their actual music business that it makes me sad that someone sold them on the idea that if they didn't have some kind of Instagram grid, that their promotion was going to fail or that their album was not going to be a success or their profile would suck. Because if they had one post that wasn't on this grid, everything goes unaligned and it's all ruined. It's the most delicate, useless piece of marketing I've ever seen in my life. Sorry to kind of crap on the whole grid thing. But there's like a sunken cost that comes with people who I've engaged with and worked with, trying to get them to get stuff working, where I have to look at them and just kind of be honest and say, hey, listen, this does not work. This will hold you back. It's worrying and stressing about whether the feed grid will look cool. These are all things the fans mostly care this much about. 00. They don't just care this much. They care double nothing. You know what I'm saying? That they care so little about those things. So we have to look at it from, don't get this idea in your head of, well, I've been posting a certain way on my profile for so long that if I start to mix it up, my profile doesn't look uniform. That's OCD. That's not marketing. Okay? So we need to go in and actually start figuring out what pieces of content resonate with your fan base. So that leads me into sort of the second thing. So now that we've got a testing mindset, we're like, okay, don't put too much expectation in the content, put it out there, test. Just run tests. And what are we testing? This is where number 2 comes in. First thing I would look at testing is the format. What is the format that you've been utilizing? So think of your format like the packaging, okay? I can have a song where the format is I'm teaching you the song. I could have a format where I'm showing you the song just the bass and I'm showing you comparisons and tones between like 4 bass guitars. Maybe the format is I'm doing a cover of a popular song, but it's a different rendition that I've created. Think of guys like Mac Glocky. If Incubus did whatever, right? System of a Down and vice versa. What are some different formats that you can look at trying? I'm sure you've seen musicians who go out on the street and show their music to complete strangers and try to get their natural reactions to their music, right? That's a format. Where people get tripped up on social media is they look at a particular format, aka like trendy dances on TikTok, right? They look at that format and assume, oh, that format has done well, therefore to have success on this app, you have to do this format. That's not the case. It's all about the demographic of the ideal person you're trying to reach. If you're just trying to reach masses that want to be generally entertained, which is most of what like short form is. It's not like super entertaining. It's like just entertaining enough so that you don't scroll on to the next video, right? Then yeah, there's going to be a certain type of format that lends to popularity and success in that niche. But if your niche is attracting a certain type of music fan, that format is not guaranteed to work for them. And even if it did, if it's not directly tied to your music, then it's all a complete waste of time. Because then you get all these people into your audience that care this much about your music and just care about your ability to barely entertain them. So we have to be very, very careful about that. So when you're creating your format, you have to think about, how am I going to package this so that my ideal fan is going to resonate with it? So when they see me in this particular situation, they can go, you think of it like a visual hook, right? Your format is a visual hook. It's a concept that gets people to go, So sometimes the visual hook is like just a video of you with your guitar and it's zoomed in on your fingers and you're doing some kind of like, some acrobatic thing. I'll tell you right now, if it's acrobatic or just super technical, classical, melodic, any of those kind of things, chord melody, you guitar players out there know what I'm talking about. People will love that kind of stuff. You could have it zoomed in on your hands for piano. I've seen videos do very, very well, some of which with my clients, where it's literally just playing a piano and then the angle of the camera is just pointing at the hands while they're playing piano. So there's very casual formats, and then there's more produced formats, and people see the produced formats, they see the TikTok dances and assume those are the only formats that work. But really, nobody knows what format will work for your audience. You have to test those things. I can assume, I can do some sort of thinking of your fan and what their day-to-day life is like and what are the other people who they follow and what kind of content is that. Like, we could do some stuff like that to really narrow down how you could pick a format that's already going to be kind of a head start instead of just completely just shooting shotguns into the night, just like, well, I hope I hit something, So what we need to do is figure out what is the format that works, that will hook in my ideal fans so that they go, oh, what's going on here, right? So there was a band called Small Town Titans, and they got a great format where it was, I don't even know if I have an item near me that I could do this. Maybe this Christmas card over here. Nope, it doesn't even have a QR code. But they would find things with QR codes and be like, will it riff? And they'll take the numbers of the QR code, turn it into a guitar riff, and now that's a piece of content. And that became a format that they used over and over and over again because they tried it and it worked and they just kept it up. And then they built a big following from it. So you have to figure it out. You have to test. You have to figure out, how am I going to present and package this? Now, the third thing that you really need to understand is not just in the visual packaging, but how are we communicating? What are the words that we're going to put on the screen, aka what's the hook or the headline? See, a lot of people don't understand that social media hooks are the same thing as back in the 90s. Some of y'all don't even know this. When you would open up magazines and then you would have these big, bold headlines that were trying to grab your attention, right? That is the same thing. Today, social media hooks, putting the text in front of the video to really get people to read it and get into the story, that's the modern headline. That's really what it is. So a hook, headline, it's all the same thing. The goal of it is to get people to, there's two things really. It's to build curiosity, to get them kind of engaged in the piece of content. But the second goal, this is really cool, is set a frame. Now, when you set a frame, that means something very specific. Some people are like, what do you mean set a frame? Like a picture frame? Like, let me tell you what I mean. The hook that you use will set a frame for the scenario that your video, the visual hook, the format that you've utilized, right? So you use the hook to bring context to the format, okay? And then that format, the situation that you've created with the format, your music is going to be the soundtrack to that. So now that you look at it from this angle, the hook reinforces and creates a frame so that people can understand the format that you're using as the medium to deliver your music, okay? So that's really how it goes down. So when you're creating things, you have to think about in the hook, how do I connect, not flex? So many people, did I just write the song of the summer? That's become such a cliche meme that I actually saw one guy use it as like an outro hook thing. Like he just did something really amazing on the piano or vocally and then was like, did I just write the song of the summer? It's become such a cliche. Don't use that. Anything that's flexy. Now, I will say this. I'm going to get some hate for this potentially. Sometimes the flex can be a good hook. I'm not going to lie, but it's all about the niche, right? If you're in a genre, let's say you're in that sort of acrobatic virtuoso guitar world, right? Sometimes flexing is what's going to get people in. Now, it depends on what area you're going in. In the guitar world, you could do the opposite of that. So the anti-flex, when Instagram guitar players just want to do sweep picking, but you just want to hear this, and then it's you doing like some soulful blues or country or some kind of R&B solo, right? Something like that. But if you're on the other side of that, if you're in the Steve Vai, Polyphia kind of acrobatic guitar stuff, then, you might want your hook to be like, is this the fastest guitar player in the world? Something kind of flexy. Of course, that's going to engage a lot of people to be like, no, the fastest guitar player is X, Y, and Z, and you're dumb, and blah, blah. But that's great marketing because you're getting people to engage and have a kind of a polarized reaction. We talk about that in other videos of like creating polarity in a sort of sweet spot where you're not so polar. You're not like Alex Jones over here or something like that. You're in this little sweet spot where you're just polar enough that you get people to talk about you, because the worst place you could be is where people have no reaction to you. You're the opposite of polarizing. You're just background noise and people just kind of go, that's the worst thing we could get. Even if we get them to go, I hate you. It's like we got them to feel something. And usually that anger is actually a symptom of something else that happened in their life. Your content just happened to be a trigger that sets something off in their brain that they're like, oh, it reminds me of that other thing that makes me mad. Oh, and then just run over to comment. So when we look at content and social media from this, if you have been going out there and you haven't been seeing results, things haven't been working, this usually is where people trip up. They've got a consistent piece of like content that they've been putting out, a format, I should say, they've been doing over and over and over and over and over again. It's not working, right? So they need to start testing things. They need to start trying new things. Test your hooks out. Do things that you think are like, oh, I wouldn't want to do it that way. Like so many people are afraid to make their hooks just the basic white and black text that's native to the platform. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like a white background with black text in it. That's just natural. It's not the fancy fonts that you're putting neon behind it. No one can read that when they're trying to go quickly. Do basic, do simple. The more produced you look, the more people typically have a bit of like a resistance to you, right? I had one client who was putting out authentic videos where it was just him with his phone, just like, yeah, rapping into the phone, doing this and this. And he started getting great views. And then he learned how to use like one of those big fancy editors like Final Cut or Adobe Premiere or some kind of thing, right? He learned how to use one of those editing softwares. I use iMovie, okay? So I don't know anything about that. But he started using this and creating these super visually crazy cool videos. They did not get the same traction. You think, what? My quality in video went up. Why didn't the views increase with it? Because you went from something that was relatable to a fever dream. You went from something that was like, here's some dude singing about like, go for your dreams, man. Rapping about going for your dreams. And here's me in my garage and just doing this and this, Then it went to like, here's these cool trippy transitions where I'm like upside down and then I turn into a cigarette ash burn that engulfs the whole thing. Like, it's so visually all over the place. There's no place for you to connect, right? And that's the thing is they thought, oh, if I just do that, I don't need to worry about the hooks. If I just create the cool visuals, I don't need to worry about trying to connect with my fan base. I can just look cool. Again, that's the hole that musicians can fall into. It's like, whoa, this is cool. This is a cool editing software that makes me look cool. I could care less. As I've learned this in my career, my care for what people think or how I can like make myself look cool has gone like this. I'm at the point now, I do not care what is cool. I care what is effective. I care what's efficient. If it works and I can get it done more often, that's what I care about. Some people will go to my band's website and they'll be like, I don't like the font. Boo-hoo. And by the way, the people that say they don't like the font are not the fans, by the way. The fans have never complained about the website design. It's always other artists, other people in the industry who like to have their opinion. They're like, well, it could be like more branded. It could be more like this and this. I'm like, dude, if I have to take my headlines that are telling people to take very specific actions that will help grow my music business, I do not want to risk them going, what does it say? For even 1 second. For even 1 second, I don't want them to go, what does that say? Because the font is some cool kind of old English font that looked cool with my album cover, but no one can frickin' read it. Like, I'm not into that. I'm into, like, I don't care if it's the most basic corporate looking font in the world, like Montserrat or something. If people can read it and it gets them to see what I need them to see and take the action I need them to take, then that's what I'm going to use. And if I don't get the same conversion rates using Old English or Libre Bakersfield or whatever the kind of font is that looks all nice and fancy, if I ain't getting the conversions with it, I'm not using it. And I've had that experience in the past where I use the cool digital or serif looking fonts When people are scrolling fast and trying to get information quickly, they can't read that, they don't care, and then they're done, right? But if you give them clear, like, anybody can read this. Like if you're a child and you can read my website. You know what I'm saying? The language is simple, it's direct, it's telling you exactly where to go. That's thinking from a fan's perspective, right? Because you're not thinking, what's going to make me look cool? How can I make myself look cool? You're thinking, how can I make the fan's experience easy, effective, and efficient? Okay, the 3 E's right there. I can make a whole video about that. But like, how do I make it easy for them? How can I make it to where they can read everything very easily? The fonts are the right size. They're big enough that they don't have to go, what does that say? You know, it's all very easy to read. There's nice imagery in there that really paints the picture. There's all these kind of things, right? So when you're thinking about your hooks for your social media, I kind of got in the context of a website there, but it applies to social media too. When you're thinking about, I want my fans to be able to scroll to my video and instantly read my hook. I don't want them to have to go, what is that? It's kind of says the thing. Because they're not going to do it. As soon as you make their brain work to try to understand what you wrote in your hook, they're gone. So you need to make it as simple and easy to read as humanly possible. And start testing, okay? Test out different hooks. Test out hooks that are funny. Test out hooks that are crude. Test out hooks that are inspirational. Test out hooks that are storytelling kind of driven, right? Test out list-based hooks, you know, the top 5 reasons, the 7 deadly reasons of this or whatever, right? There's so many different hook, you could call those hook formats. You know, there's all these different ways that we could approach the hook. There's a lot to test there. And then as far as the visual packaging of how you present your content, there's also a lot we can test there. And so those are the 3 main things you need to know, right? Test, 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 test. What do I test, Dax? You test the format, you test the hook. And you start doing this more often, and take the expectation out of the social media posts and just say, the only thing I expect is to get data, right? That's the only thing I expect is I'm going to post out content and I'm going to get data back. If you think I'm going to post out content and people are going to like it and I'm going to get some more followers and then people are going to join my email list, too much expectation. Too much expectation built up in the social media. It just needs to be, I'm posting this to figure out what works because I'm going to take this Peter Drucker type of mindset where I would like to assume I know what works. I would like to assume that I know what's cool. But instead of assuming, because we all know what they say about assuming, I'm going to go out there and make some tests happen. I'm going to go run some tests and I'm going to get some data back. And once I've done enough testing, I'm going to find what works. And then when I find what works, now I know what I can start to double down on. See, I'm not opposed to doing the same format over and over again. I am opposed to it when it's not proven. Right? So go out there, test, prove the format right, and then get people to have the right frame about the format by using a good hook, okay? Now, if you'd like some one-on-one help with this, we have some ways that you can do that. Clicking the link in the description, you can apply for a one-on-one coaching call. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, the like button, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you guys on another video inside of Musicians Ignite. Take care.